Hello and warm welcome to the Women in Leadership for Finance Network and our webinar today. So our webinar today, as you know, is a conversation about financial leadership with the last 3 winners of the HFMA Finance Director of the Year Award. And as you can see, they all happen to be women. So it's great to have you all with us today, and I know we've got a few new faces in the virtual room. So for those of you that I haven't met, my name is Zoe Pietschark. I'm the Deputy Regional Director of Finance in the East of England region, and along with Nicola, the Joint Lead for the Women in Leadership Finance Network. And it is really great to see you all. So I will, as ever, keep my introduction short today so that we do make the most of the hour that we've got. And as Nicola says, the timing for this webinar couldn't be better. So it's in the run-up for the HFMA conference, and obviously having missed the face-to-face conference last year, we now have a hybrid conference this year that I'm sure those of you who are attending are looking forward to. As a network over the last 18 months, we've talked a lot about role models, and tonight we are incredibly lucky to be joined by 3 amazing role models. So Catherine Phillips, Karen Geoghegan and Cathy Rowe. So all recent winners, as I said, of the HFMA Finance Director of the Year Awards, that's spanning 2018-19 to 2020-21. So I have to say that I have particularly been looking forward to this webinar today. It was really eye-opening to me when I realised that the last 3 winners of this award were all women. And I wasn't surprised at all, but it reaffirmed that although we don't have a gender balance in financial leadership in the NHS, we do see the huge benefits of women in financial leadership. And if chief execs need any more evidence than this, that women should be CFOs and directors of finance, then I really think that these facts speak for themselves. So I'm excited about this webinar because having met Catherine, Cathy and Karen, I can understand why they are winners, and I really can't wait for you all to find out for yourselves this evening. I'm excited because the conversation that we're about to have will showcase our 3 role models who are all genuine, down to earth and relatable. And I'm also excited because this can only mean that there will be more of this in the future. So more women stepping up and more women being acknowledged for their successes. So before I kick off the conversation, there are a couple of last comments from me. So the logistics for this evening, as ever, we're meeting virtually. So as Nicola says, if you could just keep your cameras off and mute on, unless you're asking a question, then please do put your camera on and take mute off. And as always, please make the most of the time that we've got together this evening. So please ask the questions that you want to, engage with the discussion and meet new people. It's your time, and as ever, it is safe, open and inclusive. So without further ado from me, I'm going to turn to our panel and ask the first question. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Can I ask you just the first question, which is just to introduce yourself and then tell us why you chose a career in NHS finance? And if I come to Catherine first, if that's all right.
Okay, I'm Catherine Phillips. I'm Director of Finance at Cardiff and Vale, where I've been since March. Prior to that, I was working at North Bristol, which is where I was when I won Director of Finance of the Year for my work on the field hospital in Bristol, or the Nightingale Hospital, sorry. And why I wanted to be a Director of Finance, I'm not sure I did really. I kind of ended up sat in the seat and didn't really want to give it up. So for me, it was more about trying the role, enjoying the role and growing into the role. I'll hand over to my colleagues, more about that later.
Brilliant, thanks Catherine. And Karen, do you want to go next?
Thank you, and good evening, everybody. I'm Karen Geoghegan, and I am the Chief Financial Officer for University Hospitals Sussex. And my organisation was formed on the 1st of April this year and is the product really of merger of 2 organisations, Western Sussex Hospitals and Brighton University Hospitals. Most of my career has been spent really between London and Sussex. I started off my career in the National Finance Graduate Training Scheme, and then more latterly kind of came through to Sussex. And I suppose some of my recent experience has been through being the CFO at Western Sussex, and we were asked to help out a neighbour in Brighton that was kind of very challenged, both from a quality and finance perspective. And so we effectively managing 2 organisations through a management contract, and it was through the work really around managing both trusts and exiting Brighton out of special measures that I think contributed towards me winning the Finance Director of the Year. And I'm sure we'll share more about that later. In terms of why I entered a finance career, I suppose it was more by accident than design. Can I share a little story about in terms of quite recently, my mum moved house from our family house. You know how mums kind of they keep everything that you did at school, don't they? And I came across a little letter that I'd written to myself when I was 10 years old that I was required to do at school about what you want to do when you grow up. Anyway, my letter said that I wanted to work in a hospital, but I wanted to be a gynecologist. And I was quite impressed that I could actually spell gynecologist. So I got half of that right. I ended up in a hospital, but in a very, very different role. So there was something about the training scheme that attracted me, and that's how I kind of entered into a finance career. But it wasn't a long-term plan to do that. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Great story. Thanks very much. And Kathy.
Hi everybody, I'm Kathy Rowe, Director of Finance across Tameside and Glossop CCG and Tameside Council. And for anybody who doesn't know where Tameside is, because it is one of those like mythical places, I have to say, it is within Greater Manchester. There is no postcode really that starts with Tameside, but it is an area within Greater Manchester. It is quite a special day today for me, actually, not just because we're doing this, obviously that's a given, but it's my 36th work anniversary, 2nd of December 85. I remember it very well. I know you're all going to say I can't look old enough, but obviously it is. So thank you for the copy. It is the reality. So yeah, 36 years. That's, wow, how the time flies. And yes, I think I never set off thinking I was going to be in finance. I set off in probably more of an untraditional or less traditional model or approach than what other people may have come into the system, and we can pick up on that a little bit later. But yes, I think for me, I just wanted to do a job very well. I just wanted to impress somebody because I was the 3rd child in my family, and my mum had me 20. My mum and dad had me 20 years after my brother and sister, and I think I didn't really get the attention. So I thought, well, I'm going to have to get it off somebody. So when I got to 16, I chose to leave sixth form, which was a massive issue for a lot of people at that time. But I did it, and I never looked back in some ways. And I went into my first job. And yeah, I never look back, I have to say, on many levels. But yes, I think for me, a little bit I fell into finance by accident. It was just more about I didn't want to be that person. I didn't know what I wanted to do at university. I didn't know what I wanted to be. I didn't know what I wanted to study. I needed somebody to help guide me. And a little bit of fate happened one day. And yes, the rest is history in some ways. But yeah, we can pick up a bit more on that, I'm sure, as we go. But yeah, lovely to be with you all tonight.
Thank you, Kathy, and congratulations on your 36 years. I think a lot of what you're saying there and how you, the 3 of you came into the NHS and came into finance will resonate with a lot of our audience, actually. So Karen, you came through the grad scheme, but Kathy and Catherine did not. Catherine, what was your story? How did you come into the sector in the first place?
So I did I was quite good at maths and started off doing bookkeeping in quite a small company, and I went for the first job I could get that would give me a job, and accountancy would give me study leave and give me contribution towards my study. So I basically sat on every seat in the finance department as I worked my way through AAT and ACCA. And I did ACCA because I had no intention of staying in the health service. And a bit like Kathy, 31 years later, I still haven't quite managed to work out what I'd do if I didn't do this, because it gets under your skin, doesn't it? And you love it and you enjoy it, and there are plenty of opportunities, so you never quite look anywhere else.
Thank you for that. I think your story was quite similar, Kathy. You worked your way up, if I remember
did, absolutely.
correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I went into a different, just more of a registration clerk role, a bit like in medical records and things, registering patients with GP practices, etc. at the young age of 16, and then it all became computerized, which was amazing, because then I was thinking, wow, I wanted to be at like the forefront of where things were happening, and managed to help it all go computerized. And then I started to go a bit brain dead, and I realized I'd reached the end of my tenure working in medical records, and I knew it would get there eventually. But I had a fantastic 5 years with lovely people, working how to just go to work and do a job, any job really. And then when I was 21, a job came up in the finance department. I just had an invite to an interview at the Halifax Building Society as well, because I'd started to think I need to do something else. And a job came up in the finance department where I was working, and I thought, ooh, I'm gonna go then. It was in the NHS, but it was an autonomous part of the NHS in those days called the Family Practitioner Committee. It was very small. I'm not sure how many people will remember those institutions from those days. And yeah, the rest is history. And my first day in the finance department, I started studying. So a bit like Catherine, straight into AAT. But then I did the AAT for 3 years, brilliant. But then I got so fed up of studying because I was in my 20s, I was in my heyday, going out, found beer and boys. It wasn't a great concoction, and I thought, I can't do any more studying for a while. I need to go and enjoy myself. And then I didn't pick up another exam paper for 8 years. So I went and had a really good time.
That's a long time enjoying yourself.
I had a really good time, I have to say. But it shows you can get back on the horse if you really, really want to. I didn't really want to, I have to say, but everybody was pushing me to get back on it, to say, look, you need to do this. And I did work with some really fabulous, inspirational people who said, you are going to do this, whatever it takes, I'm going to make you get through this. And I went on to SEMA, and I got married and had a baby, and did everything possible to think, I don't have to do all the exams next year because I'm now having a baby, so I can slow it down, because I got to a point where, I hated it so much because it was taking up time that I wanted to spend with my family, and I just wanted to do a good job at that point. It was not about the studying. I felt like, gosh, I really have to prove myself, but obviously you do. I wouldn't recommend that as a way to go for anybody, but what it does say, I did inspire a lot of people in the department actually to take up studying a bit later on in life, and we went from being, I think, the third worst organisation when we were in the PCT days. I think we were the third worst organisation in the whole of the Northwest for the ratio of qualified staff that we had in the department. And over a period of 4 years, I completely rewrote the training policy for everybody, because I understood how hard it was, particularly a bit later on in life, to do what you needed to do and get the time off, and the support for some people financially as well. And that made everybody review things, and they all went studying, and we went to the second best. So over a period of about 4 years, we got loads of people qualified, and it just showed just by doing something a little bit, and we got all the benefit of all those skills and expertise back in the department as well. That was quite a monumental moment, really. But I had to do it experience firsthand just to realise just how bad the training policy had been. I think it'd been there for about 30 years. So yeah, we completely rewrote it, and got a lot of people engaged back onto that.
Well, we'll come back to what happened next in a moment. I'm keen to hear from Karen, if we can come back to you, Karen, and bring you back into the conversation as well. At what point did you decide you wanted to become a finance director? Because not everyone who embarks on the grad scheme chooses that path or gets to that point.
No, they don't. The lights have just gone off in my office, so I'm just going to switch them on. And I don't know if that was coincidence. Bear with me a moment. Sorry, I don't want to look like a ghoul in the dark in that. No, you're right. And actually, the attrition, when I was on the training scheme, which again, I entered the training scheme kind of fairly last minute, because I did actually have a place going to teacher training, and it was only about a week before I was meant to join that I got called for an interview for the grad scheme. So these were never kind of long-term ambitions. I think I was surprised with the training scheme what the rate of attrition was, because when I was on the scheme, and it was probably in a cohort of about 10 people, I think there's only 2 of us that are now still in the NHS, actually. So I think that I thought that was something quite interesting. I had to be pushed to become a finance director. It was something that I was always, oh no, I can't do that, can't do that. And every kind of promotion really through my career was through, I've been so fortunate that I've had managers who've really believed in me and are kind of pulling me through rather than me stepping into that space. And I think it's a common trait, isn't it, that we never think we're going to be good enough, and we want to feel we can do a job perfectly before we can move on to the next role. And I've that has been quite a big feature in my career. So I've been really fortunate that I've had people that have kind of encouraged me, and I think being able to kind of operate in a role within a safe space. You've got people around you that are supporting you. So I was really fortunate that I had an opportunity to act up in an organisation as a finance director for a period of time, which felt like a safe way of doing it. And the acting up period that began to be 3 months, then got extended to 6, 9 and 12 months, and then 18 months. And then after that, there was an opportunity to apply for the job permanently, which I did do, but unfortunately I didn't get it. So that felt like a really big setback. But when I did get my first substantive job in another organisation, I did feel ready by that stage. So the acting up into that post really gave me a kind of hunger to do it, because I didn't want to give it up at that stage, and also built up my confidence that it was actually something that I could do. Although there are times now where I still feel like, how on earth did that happen, and how did I get here? But I'm sure there's many people that feel like that too.
I think that there are, and we might have a question from, I think Louise Lowry wants to ask a question. I wonder if it might actually be on that theme. Louise, do you want to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask?
Thanks. Sorry, I'm not somebody who can sit quietly very often. I have to ask. It's funny, I was going to ask everybody about whether or not they'd experienced imposter syndrome and that feeling of not being good enough. And when Karen was talking, there was a lot of sort of nods there around kind of times where people have found it difficult. I just wondered what actions you've all taken to help with that, so that it doesn't hold you back, and things to improve self-belief.
Does anyone want to go first? Or Catherine, do you want to chip in?
Yeah, I mean, what I think everyone doubts themselves and wants to do the best job they can do. A lot of what Karen talked about resonated with me, and I also found myself acting as a director of finance for 14 months and didn't get the job. And that you learn a lot when you don't get what you want. And I think I do think a trait often for women, not exclusively, but often, is that we do want to know that we can do the job well. And I, like Karen, when I got it the second time around, felt like I owned it, and I felt more secure, and I didn't have imposter syndrome nearly as much, although some very difficult days. But I found things like coaching, networks, going to the HFMA conference and having a drink with colleagues, and those networks and those people that trusted people you can talk to, as well as your NEDs, your chief exec, the people you work with in the team you work with, really help you when you're struggling or you can't see the way through. So I think you need a phone a friend, and you need the longer you go on, the more friends you get for different purposes, and I found that invaluable personally.
Really good advice, thank you.
Kathy, do you want to respond to Louise's question? You were nodding as well, as it's very rare that I see someone's answer or hear imposter syndrome mentioned and going, no, not me. Everyone's nodding.
No, I absolutely resonates with me as well, in terms of what both Karen and Catherine have said there. I acted up into a role as well the first time round. I was a little bit more fortunate. I did get that job then as a substantive, but it was at the time when PCTs changed into CCG. So I got the new CCG role, if you like, that emerged out of the PCTs. But I did have imposter syndrome, and it is that phone a friend. Absolutely. I had some mentors, coaches, just some buddies, just people to buddy up with. I didn't even have to be as formal as coach. You could call it mentoring now, but I've spoken to these people for so long over the last 10 years. I see them much more as friends. We have a genuine friendly chat every now and again. Networking is so important regarding this, because you do get that sense of you're all that camaraderie, you are all in it together, and you can address some of the issues together, and people have got some great ideas, and you will have some, and you can share those around, and then it's great having that opportunity to do those with. I'd also say having a brilliant team around you. Generally in your finance team, you need to know that, well, I always say, and I think most people say, you're only really as good as the team around you, aren't you? Because you rise together or you fall together, because you go as one. And you do need to spot if there are any vulnerabilities, or there are some individuals who may be a bit more fragile. Sometimes it's worth investing a lot more in the team directly beneath you or around you, and supporting them, because once they feel more confident, you can leave them, and you can delegate much more than them to get on with it, and you can help grow your wings a bit more in the leadership role, because you don't really do the numbers and all of that as so much, do you, when you get into this role? It's about learning lots of leadership qualities that there's lots of theory about and handbooks about, but there's nothing like doing it for real and getting involved in all of the issues. And there's always things that nobody will have done before or experienced before that you will be finding for the first time, and you need to go with some type of informed judgment, which you need time to be able to assimilate, don't you? And if you've got that good team around you, and you can bounce some of these things off, and your networks and your mentors or whatever, it really gives you that sense of assurance and confidence then as you start to go forward. But absolutely, imposter syndrome, I was definitely, in fact, the director of finance I worked for in the PCT actually said to me one day, I'm going to move on, because you have to be the director of finance. And I said, no, I'll come with you. Wherever you go, I'll come and be your deputy. I love working for you. I don't want to be the director of finance. No, he said, I am holding you back. This is not a chair I need to occupy. You need to own it now. You've been there, you've done it, you'd be able to do this, no problem. I've worked with you now for enough years. I know you can do it. He said, I am holding you back. And I thought, oh my goodness, what an amazing person. I was like, and for a while, that took me some time to let that sink in a little bit, because I absolutely loved being his deputy. We just had a fabulous working relationship, and I was thinking, oh no, I don't want this to stop, I don't want this to change. But he did. But the good thing was at first he moved up into like a managing director role where I was, so I had him there as well as a little bit of a security blanket to go to with some anything on the finances if need be. But then he did move on a few months later as well, and left me then sort of on my own. But
Cathy,
yeah,
if we can come back to him, because we had a fantastic webinar earlier this year about men as allies. I wish I'd known about that person then. We could have included him in that. Can I ask Louise's question to Karen as well, if there's anything that Cathy or Catherine haven't covered already that you would suggest that people can use to kind of overcome imposter syndrome?
I think there is something about, so the relationships and the team and the manager you have is absolutely critical. I suppose there's a point that comes as well where you realise, because these are really, working in finance, particularly, it's really difficult. It's really hard, and you can feel quite a burden with that as well. But realising that you're not operating on your own, I think, really helps your confidence, and therefore your belief that you can do a job well, because you're learning to work through other people. Does that, if that makes sense? So I think I constantly keep in my head that I don't have to have all the answers for things, and I feel comfortable now. It's taken me a really long time to get to this place, but feel comfortable in my head that when I don't know answers to things, because I feel comfortable asking people, whether it's in my team or colleagues, saying, God, I've never come across this before, or I don't really know where to start with this, and not seeing that as a weakness or that you're failing at something. But I recognise it's taken me a long time to get to there, and it's not always easy. So having the right people around you so that you feel you can operate in a do that safely is really important. But it's a real challenge to overcome, and I know for a lot of women in our world, that really is quite a challenge. But yeah, realizing that you're not on your own, keeping that in your mind, keep telling yourself that.
Is that helpful, Louise?
Yeah, really helpful. Thank you. It's a really good point around just remembering that you don't have to know all the answers. I think we forget that sometimes. So thank you.
Thank you for the question. Great question. So a couple of you mentioned support and mentors, coaches, people who fought your corner. Can we come back to that a little bit? And I'd be keen to explore that in more depth. Like, what support have you been given during your career? But also, what did you do that garnered that support? And what advice would you give to our network on how to make sure you're in a position where, like Karen said, for example, you've got people pulling you into roles, or as Kathy experienced, someone says, I'm the block here and I'm moving out so you can take this job. What can you do to have those people fight in your corner so fervently on your behalf? I'll ask, let's ask Kathy first. Thank you.
So yeah, it's a really difficult one, isn't it? Because you haven't got, it's down to a lot of people's characters and personalities as well with some of this, isn't it? And some people feel really comfortable in fostering some of the working relationships that you have, and yet some people would rather feel like a little bit more like further removed from some of that, isn't it? And I think for me, I've just been such a huge relationship management type of person, so I've always tried to find some type of relationship with people, even if they have been regarded as the most difficult people to work with in a system. So I have worked for people in my career that have been horrific. I would say, so bully's always a strong word, isn't it? I don't like to use that word, but they've been sort of a bully, but by stealth, if you know what I mean. It's like, it's not that so explicit, but the things that they do and the things that you know that that's really what's happening. But I've worked for people who I've seen all of these different characters and different personalities going forward, but no matter what they are or how they are, and I've always tried to find some type of working relationship with them going forward that means that I gain their respect one way or another, or there is some empathy and there is an understanding between us. Even if you don't agree, you do actually have an understanding. And I think for me, that's what's got me through some really difficult times and some obstacles when you really thought, how on earth am I going to overcome this? I've never known how to deal with some of this before, or whatever. Having those relationships to call on and work with have been the making of things. And I always start there. So, working with in different sectors. So I've been generally always more from the commissioning sector. I've worked with many providers, directors of finance. That can be often seen as quite an acrimonious relationship in the past, when you used to have all your contract negotiations, and some of the reputations people had who came into our system in particular, you'd be thinking, oh my goodness, used to contract negotiations go on for about 6 months of the year. And we changed all of that very clearly. We had a very different conversation, because that just wasn't helping. It was tainting that working relationship, knowing that process had to happen each year, and you had to suddenly start from a war and a battlefield of who gets then and pull, who moves most into the other person's camp to get some agreement. So I think that's how I always tried to approach some of that, and it made the people I worked with or for fight for me a bit. I think they got to know me, and they could see what strengths I could bring into the different roles, and that was for me what the sort of the game changer, when I learned how to cross that Rubicon a little bit on the relationship management side of things. That then led itself well.
They give you the opportunity to show your resilience, demonstrate your resilience, and therefore attract support and encouragement. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Can I ask the same question to you, Catherine? What support have you been given in your career? Support, mentoring, coaching?
I think I've always been really supported by my line managers, and even when you get an experience which is giving you feedback you didn't really want or know, then it's always really powerful in the long term. If it's and to be honest, there haven't been very many of those occasions, but I think that's valuable. I think for me, I've had less of the advocates at work and more of the helping myself. I've always been quite comfortable, as Karen's described, if I don't know something, to ask. I remember, I will ask people things if I don't know, and on the basis they can always say no, and often people will just ignore your emails if they don't want to reply, and so be it. So that's never really been a problem for me, and I will ask people anything, and if they give you a chink on the work base, if I'm more confident probably to ask people things. In terms of personal support, I've done a lot of coaching, a lot of 360, done a lot of work on the leadership skills, and by observing other people and seeing what works and seeing what doesn't work more often. And often if people have offered help, I've taken them up on it. And I suppose more latterly, I've really taken a lot of pride in growing deputies into directors and people into deputies, and done a lot more coaching myself. So for me, it's been about that. And in fact, people who worked for me end up giving me advice and support as well. So it's a real sort of circular thing where people can give you that sort of bit of advice, or the job I've got at the moment, I didn't spot. Someone else came and said to me, I found your next job, and they were spot on, but I wouldn't have seen it for myself. So it's that sort of thing about having networks and getting support from lots of different places, up, down, across. When I had a difficult experience and I wasn't given the substantive role, having acted up into it for 14 months, I felt at a really low ebb, and a couple of people, threw me a lifeline, and I grabbed them, and helped me think about, if I'm not going to do this, what am I going to do? Those are the people I'll probably remember, because they helped me when I was most at need, and they didn't have to. And that's what I try and do with other people. I've always taken the approach that if someone's in trouble, you help them, and you help them maintain their dignity and respect, and find the solution that works for them, because that's what someone did to me when I needed it. And actually, I was surprised how many people I didn't even think knew my name took the time to phone me up and say, that was crap, wasn't it? And I'll help you if I can. And so that means a lot. But you have to be brave, and you have to put yourself out there, and you have to occasionally land somewhere a little painful, but you do a lot.
Thank you, Catherine. That's fantastic.
Those occasions, and I can't believe it doesn't happen to everyone.
Thank you for that. That was a fantastic answer, particularly around the support that you've given to others and how you've mirrored what's been given to you. Karen, if we can come on to you, because you did mention that every role you've had, it's been identified for you, and people have really supported you there. How has that worked out?
Absolutely. I think just picking up on what Catherine's just said, though, because I think it's absolutely the case. I've had kind of people really encourage me to go to the next role, except for the one time when I was acting up for a long period of time and I didn't get the job. And what you've mentioned, Catherine, in terms of the people that you remember, are those who look after you at that point in time and kind of give you that lifeline, and help you pick yourself up, and you're stronger for it. And in retrospect, it's probably a really good thing that happened to me. It didn't feel like it at the time, but it gave me a level of resilience and actually confidence, and knowing that I had a really much bigger safety net than I ever thought I had, of people that are looking out for me and wanting me to do well in my career. And I think that gives you an armour, if you like, of confidence, that actually, I've found really, really valuable. I think as well, something that I learned, and this kind of coach kind of shared with me quite early in my career, was around, it doesn't always come naturally to everybody to develop relationships and kind of be a bit more outgoing and so on. But I do think generally as women we can be quite good at developing a rapport with people when we're completely ourselves, and that's something that I've had to learn for that to come quite naturally, and it feels much more natural to me now than it used to. And having to we can just strike up conversations, because you can strike up a conversation when you're in the queue in the shop, can't you, with people just kind of doing that. And at work is no different. Just strike up a conversation. It doesn't even have to be about a work thing, but it helps develop that kind of relationship and how people become to know you as a person and you as an individual and you being you. And I think people respect you more when they know you are being yourself, definitely. And also helps with because something that I never used to like doing was this kind of thing about, oh, you've got to network and you've got to do this and that, you've got to put yourself out there, if you're going to get on in your career. And that can be true to an extent, but I think being able to kind of say, just develop that rapport with people and feel a bit comfortable just striking up a conversation really helps with that. But it can be out of your comfort zone, and definitely for me at times it was. But I did force myself to network a little bit, because that's how for me, that's how I got my safety net, that when I got a big knockback, I was able to have people around me that helped me pick myself up very quickly, and then kind of you develop that resilience, and was probably all the better for it.
Brilliant, thank you. It sounds there's quite a lot of emotion actually in those last answers. I've got a next question, but I'm going to bring Nikki in before. So Nikki, you've got your hand up. Would you like to ask your question? Yeah, great to hear from all three of you, and thankfully, really following in your footsteps is just brilliant to see the work that you guys are all doing across the country, and also resonating with quite a few things that you said. I think my question was about establishing, much more of that parity of female leadership at board level, particularly in the finance role. Do you think that's ever going to be possible for as long as boards don't have the level of diversity that's required? I'm thinking particularly non-exec kind of roles in particularly in that finance remit and area. Thanks, Nikki. Who wants to pick that up first? Should I come to Kathy?
Yeah, it's a great question, because it's interesting, isn't it? If I look around the board meeting now in comparison to the one I was sat in 10, 15 years ago, it's massively different, and it's much more diverse. And I would actually say, of all the directors around there, I think, because I'm in an integrated team, so we have a single leadership team of 9 directors, because we cover all the council services as well as all the CCG, and 7 of them are women. Now, when I first went into that role 5 years ago, I would say it was a bit more like the old boys brigade. It felt very, very traditional, very stereotypical. And obviously we've got lots of counsellors in one side, lots of GPs in the others. We've got non-exec members as well. We've got the whole caboodle in on the boards that I sit on. But we have generally, I can see the tide turn over that last decade in terms of the different type of clientele that we've got round that board meeting now. I just hope that it continues to go in that direction. It's not all there. It's not got. It's not as diverse as I would like it to be, but we're definitely moving in the right direction. I think we need to do something around how we specifically give some opportunities and embrace that diversity a bit more going forward, to make sure that we've got that great wide depth of representation within those meetings. So I've definitely seen a sea change in that over the last few years, but we just need to make sure we galvanise it and keep going forward. But yeah, massive changes for me, what I've seen anyway in the last decade, for sure.
Thanks, Kathy. Catherine, do you want to pick that up?
I would concur with that. In terms of the gender split around the board, I've been lucky enough to be on boards that are very representative of gender. I would say they're not inclusive in terms of the other protected characteristics. I would also say that not all organisations are like that. particularly when I started going to some of the larger teaching hospital meetings, it would be very male dominated, and less so. It's become less so over the last 5 years. So I think there's work to do in certain parts of the NHS, but I think largely the NHS, and I've been lucky enough to have female and male NEDs in equal proportion. It's not been an issue, gender, for me. And as Kathy said, it's got better and better.
Thanks, Catherine. Karen, anything to add?
No, I think it has got better, but there's still a way to go. And I'm fortunate, I've got a female chief executive as well, and a number of exec colleagues, and about, I think, at least half our NEDs are female as well on our board. So it's a very kind of balanced in that regard. But I agree with Catherine that the other protected characteristics, not so much. So doing well in terms of the kind of gender split, but less so in others. But I know there are organisations where it's not the case, and there is a way to go around that. But hopefully, you know, the more women there are, finance directors and in other executive roles as well, that traditionally haven't had as many women, then that is encouraging more to come through. But we know from the statistics there's still a long way to go there.
Brilliant, thank you. And Nikki, thank you very much for your question, and good luck for next week. I know you're on the shortlist for this award, so good luck. So just kind of honing on that last bit, really. So we do know that across the country there is a gender imbalance at CFO DOF level. We've talked a bit about the internal barriers that might prevent women getting there, so imposter syndrome and confidence. I was wondering if we could just expand a bit. What are your views on other barriers that might be stopping women becoming directors of finance and FDs? I mean, and just for a bit of context, the general statistic is that at DOF level, there's only 25% of DOFs that are female. Can I, who would like to go first? Catherine, can I come back to you?
Yeah, I'm surprised at that. And I noticed there's a comment in the sidebar about sort of regionalisation of that. So I think that's an interesting point, because obviously your perception comes from your own reality, and I'm conscious, therefore my own reality isn't at 25%. In fact, it's much more where I work, and certainly in Wales where I work, where there's 6 health boards, 3 are female FDs. So you know, I think it's very representative. Sorry, I've lost the question and now getting distracted by the chat box, Zoe.
Do you think there are
barriers to?
Yeah.
I think there are a couple of barriers that are particular to women. I think one is the perfection that I certainly know, and colleagues have shared with me, that I think we, as women, we like to know we're going to do a job and do a job well. We don't like to take risks, I think, and I don't mean to generalize, but I think it is quite a female trait. I think also, you know, we have family responsibilities, and I don't think they are always shared evenly yet. I think it's progressive, but we are not Denmark. We don't have, you know, we've made a lot of steps since my 21-year-old was born, and we have decent maternity leave, and we can share it now. But there is work to do to share family, and just the logistics of taking maternity leave, in a sense, puts a dent in the time you're at work. So that has to have an impact, doesn't it? I don't think it has to be a barrier. I think it's just a fact, and we need to not make it an issue. So I think there just needs to be, I think people just need to be brave, and they need to ask for the help they need. But that is easier said than done.
Thanks, Catherine. Karen, can I come to you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree wholly with you, Catherine. I think that the work-life balance inherently, I think, just create a whether we call it a barrier or something else, I still think it can impact how women can progress their careers, if I'm honest. And I know even I personally, when I had my children, that definitely paused my career for a period of time. And I think even when you come back from maternity leave, or any time in your life where you're choosing that you want to have a bit more time with family, and yes, you get agreement to go part-time, what that means in reality, and that being kind of really allowed to go part-time down to 4 or 3 days, but you still have a job that takes 5 days a week to do, and what's kind of set up around you to make it feel real. I think there's still quite a long way to go around that. So of course employers have to give you the chance to go part-time if you ask for that, but it's the support that's wrapped around that to enable that to be done in a meaningful way, I think is something that we still don't get quite right, I'm afraid to say. So, and I think that's the reality, but it doesn't mean we have to accept it. I think it is something that from my perspective, I think is still something that is quite a challenge.
Agreed, we have more work to do in that arena, definitely. Kathy?
Yeah, thanks. I think we just put ourselves under a lot of pressure, don't we? Because we know if maternity leave or whatever it is comes into question, you feel you've always got to prove yourself a bit more, therefore, to make sure you make up that ground, and you can do things I can do a full-time job in 3 days. Of course I can do that. I'm wonderful. You try and overcompensate for the things that you think you've got to make up on, and I think the balance is really, really difficult. I think the thing that I argued about at home more than anything was who was doing nursery drop-off and nursery pick-up every day. It's the debate we had every night, and we had a row about it every night, because we both had good jobs, and we both were like in the, I don't think I've got this meeting, well, I've got this one, and it became a very stressful environment constantly. At least that has ended now that my son is now 17, albeit we now have it with the dog. We have doggy daycare. However, under lockdown and working from home arrangements, that's also managed to sort itself because we're here all the time. But yeah, it's all pretty stressful, isn't it? Because we want to be mum of the year, housewife of the year, employee of the year. You want to do everything well. You don't want anyone to find an excuse as to why you're not doing something well, because you think you can do all that multitasking business and split it all accordingly. But we know ultimately we put ourselves under a huge amount of pressure, don't we, to do that with.
Brilliant, thank you. Another quick question for me. So I started my introduction today by talking about you all as role models, and I think you've really demonstrated that over the last 51 minutes. I wanted to ask you who your role models had been, so who you role model now or who you have role modeled in the past. That's okay. Karen, can I come to you first?
I must admit, I don't have a particular, this is the one person. I think it's a combination of qualities of a number of people that I've been really privileged to know during my career so far. Each, a number of those have I've seen something in them that I've kind of been really quite inspired by and learned from, really. So I can't pick kind of a single person, but it's a combination of people that I've been fortunate enough to kind of who've inspired me and encouraged me as well. I mean, I'm lucky enough that I've got an amazing chief executive who I think is a really inspirational leader as well, and I've learned a lot from her. But my mum as well, to be honest, brilliant role model, just in terms of kind of supporting me, helping me out with childcare, all of those kinds of things as well has been brilliant. So yeah, I think there's been kind of various pieces of role models throughout my career that I've been really fortunate enough to kind of look up to.
Brilliant, thank you. Kathy?
Yeah, similar to Karen, I've worked for some fabulous people in my career. I've worked for males and females, they've all been fabulous, but there was 2 males in particular who I wouldn't have been director of finance if it wasn't for those 2, because they just demonstrated just some leadership qualities that made me believe in myself and made me actually think I could do this role. And if it wasn't for either of them, one of them who made me get qualified against every bit of me that didn't want to do studying anymore, and he made me do it, and I couldn't thank him enough for doing that. And the second person who I referred to earlier, who then moved on and said, I'm stopping you, you need to do this, this is your job, I wouldn't be here today. So I look at them and think, wow, how just the qualities they both demonstrating, how they could see that, no, we need to do the things for the person and do whatever they can at their own expense to some way, because they did set the bar high then on anything else that followed in a way. The first person gave me a month off to get over my finals, and I was like, you can't give me a month off, and I was panicking about leaving work and what would everyone else think, because nobody else got a month off. And he said, no, you need a month off, you're a deputy director of finance, I shouldn't have really promoted you to that without you being fully qualified, so go and do it. And thank God I passed, because I was dreading thinking I'd give me a month off, and then I had to tell him I didn't. But then the second person just doing the things he'd done and saying, no, it's your time to shine in a way. All those things, it just makes you absorb that, don't you, over your career, and you hope you can repay that back to other people within your teams, because you would want to I would want to treat others in the way I was treated. So I hope I've repaid that back over the years and supported people on their own journey and their own development. But yeah, it's all those bits of things, isn't it, that you remember out those people that, you know, you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for those particular people.
Brilliant, thank you. And Catherine?
So similar, really. I think I've had lots of role models, and I don't think they've been a range of people at a range of times. I think in my early career it was more professional people. I would see how they managed, how they did stuff, and I'd admire qualities in them, and I would sort of do a bit of a pick and mix. And I think as I've done more leadership work, I've been lucky to work with some great chief execs and some very different styles, actually. And I've been able to think about what sort of team I work best in, what brings out the best in me, what brings out the worst in me, and also able to work on those things. So a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons at different times in my career, because you consolidate and adapt and change your approach, don't you, as you learn what works and what doesn't work, and you learn a bit more about yourself and become more confident. So I think it's like a pick and mix for me, and it continues, it never stops.
Brilliant, thank you.
Have we got time for one more question, Zoe?
One more, yeah, definitely.
I was going to ask what advice would you give, but we've covered quite a lot of advice as we've gone through this. So I think I'll go back and ask the question I asked of the audience at the beginning, actually. And what do you feel is the most important quality that you would want to see in a finance director? And bearing in mind the experience that you've had, the contact you've had with the role models that have supported you and influenced you, inspired you. If I could start with Karen, please.
I think there's a couple of things. I think when I was referencing earlier about just really being yourself, I think don't try to be something else because you think that's what's expected of you. I think being quite true to yourself, I think, is because I think people can pick up early if you're not. So for me, that's really important quality, and being a good listener. So whether that's through asking the kind of right type of questions of people to show that you're kind of listening, or listening to not just advice but just your team around what's going on. I think a lot of listening is what I try to do, but from others who I've kind of been inspired by, I notice that they do a lot of listening as well. So for me, they're some key qualities, as well as kind of, because I think that helps you work through people, and I think that's essential for anyone to be successful and happy in their role, is to be able to work through people.
Thank you, Karen. Catherine.
So I completely agree with that. Pick some other ones so that we can get the benefit of sort of three looks at it. So I think for me, particularly in the industry we're in, the service we're in, you can't be a finance director and just be in the finance. You have to be in the service. You have to understand what it is you're trying to do. And so for me, understanding the implications of what something will do in the finances, and adding a can-do attitude to trying to support clinical exec colleagues to deliver the right thing, even if it's the wrong thing for your organisation. So I think that is really key, that sort of bigger strategic, what are we trying to achieve here? Because we can get so ground down in positioning, can't we, and get backed into corners, but actually taking the long-term view and the strategic view, as well as support and challenge, whether that's down, across or up, really, but challenge in a supportive way as opposed to a critical way. Gets things done much easier.
Thank you. And Kathy, finally with you then, I'll hand across to Zoe to wrap up.
Thank you. So for me, I've always valued honesty, and I know a couple of the people on the meeting did put that in the chat. Sometimes maybe a bit too honest, but I think people can deal with it when you're honest. It's that not knowing or not being clear on something or not understanding something properly. I think if people are honest with each other, you do get a new type of respect for each other as well, and that because they know that you're always going to tell them the truth on things. So that's always something I've tried to stand by. A sense of humour. I've worked for so many dour accountants in the past that I literally just could not cope with, and just having that sense of humour that people can just recognise, and you can make a bit of fun out of the work environment and make things feel normal. That always stood us in good stead. That's always gone a long way. And I think one of the biggest qualities is, and I've worked for different people in this, and that's why I know how it's so important to me when it is in place, knowing somebody has my back and knowing that I have theirs. That for me is the most important thing that I've worked with, because I've worked for somebody who didn't, and it was such a vulnerable experience, not knowing on a day-to-day basis what you were going into and what you were going to be asked to deal with. Yeah, so knowing when you have that relationship that you can do that with your, whether it's your chief executive or whoever, that for me is probably the greatest trait that I would want in any working relationship in my organisation.
Brilliant, thank you for that. I really enjoyed the discussion this afternoon, so thank you so much for your time. I'm conscious of time, 1 minute over, so I'm going to do a super quick wrap up. It always amazes me how quickly an hour goes, I have to say. So super quick summary of the things that we've discussed. And it's been wide ranging, so let's see how this goes. So first thing that really struck me was that initial discussion about happy accidents and kind of falling into a vocation, which came across really clearly, I think, from each of you. There was then a really great example, really clear understanding of how you support others through the experience that you've had, and Kathy, the example that you gave of being able to change the study policy so it became more accessible for others, especially those studying later in life. So that impact carrying through came across really clear. Some great advice around not putting too much pressure on ourselves, which we know we all do, and topics like imposter syndrome, confidence, that have come up previously as well, and how you've all come over those. Really clear feed through from overcoming setbacks, which is incredibly important, and it seemed to happen to each of you, and you've learned the lessons and picked yourselves up and had a support network to pick yourselves up to go forward. And then leading on to the importance of networks, which we have talked a lot about actually within this network, but the huge importance of building our own networks, and what we can do for our networks as well. And then someone telling you can do it. So someone giving you that confidence and telling you that this is the job for you, and that you can do it. And that you don't need all of the answers all of the time, and kind of relaxing into that. And all that takes a bit of experience. It's really clear advice and very, very valuable. And then finally, just be brave, put yourself out there and be yourself. So hopefully that's a kind of a fairish summary of, we talked about a lot more, but a fairish summary of what we've talked about. So just before we finish, I wanted to get on to some proper thank yous. So firstly, a huge thank you to Catherine, Karen and Kathy for joining us this afternoon, for your honesty and your frankness, and for spending your time with us. So brilliant, thank you very much. And Nicola, thank you again for being my co-host this afternoon as well. And then last but by no means least at all, thank you to the network. So thank you for attending and for your engagement. It's been great as ever. As we have done in the past, and as Nicola mentioned at the beginning, we will repeat this session. So the recording has been taken and we'll repeat it on Tuesday next week at 12 noon for anyone who couldn't access it today. So please do let others know. And as you know, that we repeat this webinar as a direct result from the feedback that we've received from you in the past. So please do continue to let us know what you think, any comments that you've got, and we will take those on board and take them forward. Our next webinar is planned to be in late January, early February, and actually picking up on one of the themes that we've talked about today, which was around working through adversity, kind of failing and coming back from that, and also support through change will be our theme for the next webinar, and we'll get some more details out to you as soon as possible on that. And so before I close, just really looking forward to seeing anyone who's going to be attending in person the HFMA conference next week. Really looking forward to seeing 4 years in a row of a female finance director of award. The shortlist is all women, so Nikki Briggs, who we had with us earlier on this call, Sue Wallison and Sheila Sensen. So good luck to all of the shortlist. Nicola and I will stay on after this. This is the end of the formal part. Nicola and I, and possibly some of the panel members, will stay on after this just for a little bit of informal networking if anyone can stay around. For anyone who can't stay around, thank you again for attending. I look forward to seeing you at the next webinar, if not before that. And although it's a little bit early, but I'm not going to see you before Christmas, so very early Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. I think it's the first time I've said it. Thank you all and good night.